Thank you, Linda. And I'd just like to comment that this meeting is being recorded and that by continuing with this meeting, you are deemed to have given your permission to be recorded as a participant. My name is Carol Hartz, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Sarasota County. Before I introduce our speaker, Ron Turner, I'd like to tell you quickly about our upcoming events. All of our primary forums will be held at 5:30 p.m. over Zoom. You'll be able to register for a virtual seat at the forum as of Monday's upcoming email, that's June 29th. And you have been and will be able to enter questions in advance through our email or through our website. We're excited to have added 3 forums, and I'll tell you what we're looking at now. City Commission Forum District 2, July 22nd. City Commission Forum Districts 1 and 3, July 23rd. That's a new one. State House District 72, July 27th. Sarasota County Commission Board 1 and 5, July 29th. School Board Forum, August 3rd. I'd also like to mention that there is going to be, Northport City Commission on August 5th. That's also a new forum for us. There will be a new member orientation on August 6th at 5 p.m. And now I'd like to introduce Ron Turner. We have a number of questions for Ron submitted in advance today. As a matter of fact, we have 5 or 6 questions before I got up this morning. So Ron is a very popular man. Oh, and I'd also like to point out, and some of you may not know, but Ron was unopposed in his bid to continue as supervisor of elections. So I don't know if I'm saying this the right way, but Ron is deemed to be our next supervisor of elections and will not be on the primary ballot for that reason. Okay. Please use the chat function to send any more questions to us. We may have to screen for duplicates, combine questions, or skip some questions entirely because of time constraints. Please bear with us. Ron Turner was elected Sarasota County Supervisor of Elections in 2016. Supervisor Turner began his career with the Sarasota County Elections Office as Chief of Staff. He serves as Treasurer of the Florida Supervisor of Elections Statewide Association. In addition to his work as an elections administrator, Turner has extensive governmental and nonprofit leadership experience. Turner earned degrees from Eckerd College, the University of Missouri, and Harvard University. Supervisor Turner serves on the board of directors of First Step of Sarasota, is a graduate of Leadership Sarasota County, and is a member of the Disabled American Veterans. Turner is a proud veteran of the United States Army. Now, most of us, all of us are on mute, but let's go ahead and welcome Ron Turner now by waving. Thanks for coming. I'll then turn the microphone over to him. And Ron, when you're finished with your talk, I'll come back and moderate the questions that we receive from the audience. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. And it's great to be with the League again. I've spoken with the League in the past several times during my time as Supervisor of Elections. Obviously, this is the first time to speak to you, address you via Zoom. But I can, like the rest of you, assure you that I've been on lots of Zoom calls and having Zoom meetings since back in March, around that time frame. So it's a busy election year in 2020. As we know, we have a primary election coming up on August the 18th, not far away. And then we have the general election occurring on November 3rd. In Florida and across the country. We just finalized our list of candidates this year. Candidate qualifying week was June 8th through June 12th. And so that was the last time, June 12th at noon, that anyone in Florida could run for a state or county office here in the state of Florida. And as Carol mentioned, this year was an election year for the Supervisor of Elections also. The 5 constitutional officers have to run for re-election or up for election during presidential years. So that's what Carol was referring to, that noon deadline on the 12th. So I was unopposed, and so I really appreciate the support from the community in the work that we're doing here in the elections office. This is going to be a busy primary ballot in August. There's going to be a lot for individuals to vote on. Remember that Florida is a closed primary state. I'm sure everyone in the league knows this, but I'll just go over that to make sure that everyone understands that in the August primary, registered Democrats will get a Democratic ballot, registered Republicans will get a Republican ballot, and voters who do not have a party affiliation or who are registered with a minor party will get a nonpartisan ballot. This year, there's a lot for everyone to vote on. One of the races that we have this year, there's a state attorney primary race on the Republican ballot. There are charter review board races, hospital board races on the ballot. We have this year, that's something new, is a single member districts that we have in Sarasota County for the Board of County Commissioners. And as we know, that was something that was passed as a charter amendment in 2018 and took effect during this election cycle for the first time, that we have single member districts for county commission elections. So there are several of those races on the ballot this year as well in districts 1, 3, and 5. And the other unique thing about this election cycle is that the city of Sarasota, for the first time, has their elections in the August and November cycle also. So there are a number of candidates for those living in this city of Sarasota city commission districts as well. And then for everyone in the county, regardless of party affiliation, there is a universal primary contest for sheriff. So I think, as all of you know, Tom Knight, our sheriff, is retiring at the end of this current term of office. There are 2 Republican candidates for sheriff of Sarasota County. And because there were no other candidates other than the 2 Republican candidates, under Florida law, that becomes a universal primary contest. Essentially, that contest becomes the general election for all intents and purposes for this race for sheriff. And so everyone in the county, regardless of party affiliation, will see the sheriff's race on their primary election ballot for the August 18th election. And then the other things that we all have on our ballot are school board races for districts 2 and 3. And those will appear on all of the ballots in the county also, because those are nonpartisan, a nonpartisan contest. So we were busy the last week and over the weekend proofing ballots, because there are a lot of contests again on the primary ballot. And so there are a few hundred ballot styles throughout the county, because we don't all get the same ballot. It depends again on your party affiliation and where you reside in the county. So each of us has a little bit different variation in the ballot, and that's why there are hundreds of ballot styles in the county. And that's something that takes a great deal of time that we have to go through to proof. The other thing that you'll notice about this election that you would have noticed, or these coming elections that you would have noticed in March on the ballot, is you will have a bilingual ballot moving forward. So you will see English and Spanish on all ballots in Sarasota County. That's something new that started with the 2020 election cycle. That would have been evident in March, and you will notice that in the primary and the general election ballots moving forward. So this has been an interesting year. You know, the coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic really started in Florida March the 1st, when the governor announced the first cases in Hillsborough and Manatee County, our counties. As we know, The Manatee County case was actually, that individual was here in Sarasota County at Doctors Hospital. And I think we're all familiar with that. So Sarasota County has been touched by the virus from the very beginning, from day one here in Florida. So that was announced on March the 1st, the initial cases in Florida. Well, we were already in the middle of a presidential preference primary that was held March 17th. So we were a little more than 2 weeks out from the primary election for President of the United States here in Florida. What did that mean? Well, right away, within just a few days of the news of the coronavirus here locally, we started losing poll workers who started contacting us during that election to tell us that they could no longer work or had chosen not to work. So every day we would have 10 or 20 individuals that would contact us, call us via email, that would say they could not work at the time. So we did our best to try to fill those gaps, those voids. So we would get a few more people that would sign up, get 5 more, and then we would lose 10 more, and gain 8 and lose 12. And it was really a battle trying to keep enough poll workers because I think, as many of you know, our poll worker population tends to veer towards the population by age that's probably more at risk for this virus. The average poll worker in Sarasota County is 69 years of age. So that really hit our workforce for elections really hard. So in the presidential preference primary, we ended up losing about 180 poll workers. That was about 30% of the workers that we would have had in that election. So what we had to do to address that was we consolidated a number of polling locations, about 16 locations in the county, so we could maximize the poll workers that we had, because under Florida law, you have to have a certain number of poll workers in certain positions that are required by law. And then from a functional standpoint, outside of a legal one, to do certain tasks, you need a certain number of people. So we had to maximize that poll worker workforce here in Sarasota County. And the only way I felt that we could do that was to consolidate some of our polling locations. So we made that decision about 5 days before the election. And it's a good thing that we did, because by Monday, the day before the election, we had a polling location that contacted us saying they didn't want us to come to their location. So we ended up having to move those people. And all through the weekend up through election day, we still had poll workers that were deciding that they couldn't work with us. But we made it through the primary. We had about a 38% turnout. I believe that we had the second highest turnout in Florida for any county our size or larger. So we made it through that election. But what does that mean for the primary in the general elections? Well, one, we have nearly 100,000 vote by mail requests for the primary right now, and growing by the minute. We get requests via email and through our website, and phone calls, and through traditional mail every day, all day, round the clock. So that number is growing and will continue to grow through the general election. So almost 100,000 right now for the primary. That means that's more than we've ever had for any election, including a general election in Sarasota County. We've never had this many vote by mail ballots before for any election. So if we've got nearly 100,000 for the primary, by the time we get to the primary, I'm sure that that number will exceed 100,000. And for the general election, I'm certain that it will be thousands more added to that number for vote by mail here in Sarasota County. Obviously, part of that is because of the virus, a large part of that. We were expecting a large vote by mail number anyhow for the general election. We were already, before the virus, was anticipating that we would have about 100,000 vote by mail ballots for the general election. That was based on the growth that we've experienced over the years in vote by mail, since this has become a more popular way to vote. So we were already anticipating a large vote by mail number. So then add the virus to that, and then we've certainly increased those numbers in Sarasota County and across the state of Florida, and I'm assuming with other states, depending on their voting methods as well. So we will definitely continue to see an increase there. Election day, what is likely to happen, at least for the primary, is probably a similar polling location consolidation that we had in March, meaning that we will likely have fewer polling places. We're working on that now. And again, that's based on the number of poll workers that we have in the county, because we're still short for the August election, having enough poll workers to completely fill out the normal kind of bench of poll workers that we would have to have all of our locations open in the county on election day. So it is highly likely that we will be reducing those number of polling locations, and we will be notifying voters where their potential, if they do have a change in polling location for election day, where their new location will be, which would typically be in a precinct next door. Because if you do a polling place consolidation under the law, it is supposed to be in a contiguous precinct, meaning it's a precinct that adjoins that precinct. So we can move it to a polling location nearby. We try to look at distance and those sorts of things to make sure it's not too far. And then the other thing is we will have 5 early voting sites for the primary election. The 3 elections offices, Northport, Sarasota, Venice, North Sarasota Library, and Sarasota Square Mall. All of those locations will be open for early voting for the primary. There will be 9 days of early voting. One of the things that we have done for the primary and the general that we have never done in Sarasota County is we've added the Sunday, the optional Sunday before the election, in as an early voting day in Sarasota County. Prior to that, we'd always stopped on the Saturday prior because we'd use the Sunday to prepare for the election. But I made the decision this election cycle that we needed to use every day of early voting that we had available to us under the law, because we need voters to either consider vote by mail or consider early voting as an option also, and not necessarily wait till election day, because we've seen what's happened in recent elections in Georgia, in Kentucky, and other states. And when you're looking at keeping voting booths potentially 6 feet apart, check-in stations 6 feet apart, that means you can have fewer voting booths in a polling location, maybe fewer check-in stations, trying to keep the public as much as we can, encourage them to stay 6 feet apart and marking that out. So that those type of processes and implementing those guidelines that have been recommended by the CDC could potentially slow things down. And I know some of my colleagues in Florida are actually going so far as to warn people that there will be lines on election day and encourage people to look at the alternatives. I would just say that Florida has done a good job for the last 18 years. We've had vote by mail in Florida. It started in 2002 as no excuse absentee voting. And then in 2016, the legislature changed the name to vote by mail. But essentially, it's the same thing as no excuse absentee voting that was implemented in 2002. Not much has changed with it since that time. So we've been doing this for 18 years in Florida. We're not talking about anything new, and we're not talking about mailing a ballot to every voter. Florida law does not allow that. That's called a mail ballot election. It's a whole different statute in Florida, a whole different law, and Florida law does not allow that type of election for when you have candidates on a ballot. It's only allowed for a referendum or issue elections only. So we can't use that for a ballot where you have candidates on it. So that's a whole different set of laws under Florida law. But vote by mail is the same thing as absentee voting, no excuse absentee voting. And we have 3 ways to vote. And that's certainly, I think, a very positive thing in Florida. Voters can choose to vote by mail. They can choose to go to vote early. Remember, early voting is very similar to what you experience on election day. You get you come in and show your photo signature ID. They check you in on the same electronic poll books we use on election day. You're issued a ballot. You take it to the same voting booth and tabulators that we use on election day. So early voting is very much the same as election day voting. And that's an important message, I think, to help us get out to people that that early voting is essentially the same experience you're going to have at the polls on election day. And then for the people that still want to go vote on election day at the polling locations, as I said, will be open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. as normal, and we will be communicating with voters about the potential changes there. So with that, I think I can start to answer some of your questions that you have, and about, I'm sure, vote by mail and other topics that we have, and I'm happy to talk and to answer all the questions that you have.
Thank you, Ron. I'm going to begin the questions. Some of them you touched on or covered in your presentation, and if you would, if it's something you've already covered, just a 1 or 2 sentence summary, and we'll move on. The first question from Linda: do you foresee any vote by mail problems given the ongoing funding situation with the U.S. Postal Service?
Not that I'm aware of. We have a great relationship with the Postal Service locally. We communicate with the postmaster and with the management staff of our local post office to make sure that they know when our mailing dates are for an election. Try to work with them as much as possible locally, at least, and we've been doing that for years, having meetings and conversations with them. So no, I don't think that it will. They have not indicated that it's going to be an issue for us. So we have a good relationship in our area with the Postal Service, and that we expect to continue. So no, I don't expect those. I get that question a lot, but I don't expect that, as far as I know right now, to impede anything.
Thank you. All right. In the past, my ballot, and this is from Linda, Amy, I'm sorry. In the past, my ballot has been rejected because my signature did not match. Is there a way to confirm how the office has my signature on file to ensure it does not get rejected? If I sign my ballot exactly how my signature is on my driver's license, will that work? And one more sentence, Ron. If the ballot gets rejected for signature not matching, how long will it take to correct the issue? Given the increase in vote by mail, I'm concerned the office will be overwhelmed and won't be able to make the correction.
Okay. Well, a few things. Obviously, we do use signatures that we have in the voter file. We can use signatures from the voter registration application. Now, if that was done at the DMV, then we will have that DMV signature. That's just like on your driver license. Or if you registered online, that would also be your driver license signature that we have on file. The other signatures that we use are from the electronic poll books, or from past, well, primarily from the electronic poll books now. As far as signature differs, we contact any voter that has an unsigned vote by mail ballot or a signature differing ballot. Regardless of the quantity of them, that is a rare thing. We don't have that many. You're talking about hundreds out of 90,000 ballots or so. So you're talking about a pretty small universe. What we do is we send a letter to the voter to contact them. We send an email. We call them by phone, and if they have a mobile phone, we send a text message. So 4 ways: we mail, we email, we phone call, and we send a text message to them to give them an opportunity to cure that signature deficiency. They have until 2 days after the election to cure that deficiency. So the election's on Tuesday. They have until Thursday to cure that signature deficiency. We provide an affidavit for the voter to sign at that point, and then they provide identification to us, and we can cure that signature deficiency. I think in the March election, we had the rejection rate from the canvassing board, and it would have been because of unsigned or no signed, was 0.24% or something. It was the second lowest of any large county in Florida.
Wow. Thank you. Okay. I think you've answered this, but let me just ask if there's something you'd like to add. How does it look for having enough polling places for the primary on August 18th and general election on November 3rd?
Polling places really aren't the issue. We've had a couple of places that have asked us not to come there, maybe 2 or 3, and we will deal with that. The location isn't the issue. It's having enough poll workers. For a November general election, we would typically hire about 900 poll workers, and then we would hire another maybe 300 temporary staff to work early voting and help work in our offices with vote by mail request and vote by mail opening and things. So that's about 1,200 people or so that we would hire during a general election. In August, we have a smaller workforce because the primary turnout is generally smaller than November. So the workforce would be smaller because we adapt based on the size of the election. But still, it's not a location issue. It's a poll worker issue. We still need poll workers. We're doing a mailing this week. I'm sending a mailing out to non-vote by mail households of registered voters that is soliciting for poll workers and reminding people they have 3 ways to vote, and the vote by mail is one of them. So that will go later this week. But we're still short of poll workers, and that's the biggest issue really is, again, workforce right now, because where do we get enough workers from? I mean, we're appealing to every organization in the community, and the county's helping us with some employees and things from the Board of County Commissioners, but that still is not enough to completely fill the things. And we're having to make decisions now. So it's highly likely, at least for August, that consolidation of polling places will take place. And then if this improves by the number of workers that we get over the next few weeks, then for November, we may be able to back off on some of that and go back to our original polling places, potentially. But it's all going to depend on the number of poll workers and at what point we're getting these, because some of these decisions have to be made like in the next couple of weeks here.
Thank you. And I'll add that the Supervisor of Elections Office sent the League social media posts requesting poll workers and telling people how to sign up to be a poll worker. And we'll be issuing those in our emails on our website and in our social media. So besides SarasotaVotes.com, you can also look on our social media. Ron, we're going to switch topics for you, and we're going to talk about ex-felons registering to vote. What process do you use to see if a felon can register to vote? Are there many people being able to register, in your opinion?
So the process is the same as it's always been, and that is a voter or a potential voter fills out a Florida voter registration application. On the application, it asks if a voter has been convicted of a felony, if the rights have been restored, if they check, if they're able to confirm that they're not a felon or haven't been convicted of felony, or if they have, their rights have been restored, then we enter that data into the Florida voter registration system, and the state of Florida checks it and sends us back, the Supervisor of Elections in each of the county, kind of either a green light to go ahead and add this person to the Florida voter registration rolls, or a yellow caution light to say we need to do more research. I think, as we all know, there have been lawsuits. There was a recent lawsuit where a federal judge actually helped create a form that any individual that isn't sure if they still have outstanding fines or fees can actually request an opinion from the Florida Division of Elections. And the Division of Elections has 3 weeks to answer them. We have those forms in our office. We have that form on our website right now. But really, for the Supervisor of Elections, nothing has changed. We have not, to my knowledge, removed anyone from the voter rolls as a result of anything post Amendment 4, other than anyone being currently a felon and in the system, either incarcerated or maybe on probation or parole, or something where they would not be eligible anyhow. And those are the only people, to my knowledge, here in Sarasota County that have been potentially removed from the voter rolls since Amendment 4 passed.
Thank you. This next question deals with how your office is handling what seems to be a large influx of vote-by-mail ballots. And the questioner asks, what measures are being taken to ensure a timely tabulation of those ballots? And how does the Track Your Vote-by-Mail ballot system keep up with the extra load?
Okay, so two things. One, after the 2018 recounts, the Florida legislature created kind of a sweeping election reform bill. And one of the things that was allowed is for us to now be able to start opening and tabulating vote-by-mail ballots 22 days before an election. The governor recently, through executive order, backed that up actually a little bit further for a few days. I don't think that that's going to be an issue for us here in Sarasota County. That typically seems to be more of an issue where, we're a large county, but we're on the smaller end of the large counties in Florida. That becomes more of an issue where really I think you start to look at Southeast Florida, like Miami-Dade and other counties because we have a one-page ballot for the primary and 100,000 vote-by-mail ballots. They will have multiple pages and hundreds of thousands times each ballot page. So that becomes more of an issue. But for us, we'll do whatever it takes to get the job done, whether that's nights, weekends, whatever it takes to do, we will get it done. So I'm not concerned about any of the tabulation being held up. We're just going to start earlier, and if we have to have longer days, as I said, and weekends, we're always ready and always willing and have been, just like this past weekend, we worked to proof the ballot. So that's not unusual for us. The other thing about Track Your Ballot, that should be up to date. That's going to be based on the entry of the ballot information, going out and coming back. Will it be delayed? As far as I know, I don't think so. If it was, it would only be, a day or two. It's not something that's going to be delayed by weeks. Track Your Ballot is a great service on our website. It actually tells you when your vote-by-mail ballot was mailed to the voter, when it was returned to the elections office, when we received it back, and we also put a message on when we tabulate those ballots, so you know that it's been counted at that point.
Thank you. We have a number of questions about process now. Can a voter drop off their vote-by-mail ballot during early voting?
Yes, and I forgot to mention that, but one of the things that we did starting in 2020, we had secure drop boxes that have been made. They are in all of our elections offices during business hours. So, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5, they're always available once the ballots go out. They will be functional in the Sarasota, Venice, and Northport offices. And then during early voting, you can also drop off at any early voting site into the same type of secure drop box during early voting days and hours.
Very good. I asked for a mail-in ballot about a month ago because I'm going back up north. I have not yet received one. Does the Supervisor of Elections in Sarasota mail the ballots closer to the election? Do I have to make a request for each election? Do I have to request a vote-by-mail ballot for the primary in August and then again for the general election in November? Thank you.
The reason that you wouldn't have gotten a ballot yet is because the ballots are finished. That's what as I said, we just had the candidate qualifying June 12th. You have to go through the ballot of laying the actual ballot out. I mean, I can show you. I've got some in front of me here. And then we have to proof all of those, test all of those ballots to make sure before they go to the printer and after the printer gets them and their files coming back, before we can even begin to mail them, because we're trying to make sure that they are correct and that they're functioning correctly. Florida law, when Florida law allows the ballots to be mailed out for military and overseas voters, those ballots have to go out no later than 45 days prior to an election, right? So we're mailing those ballots to military and overseas on July 2nd because of the July 3rd holiday with July 4th, right? And the domestic voters, Florida law allows us to begin mailing those 40 days prior to an election. So the first mail drop for those will be July the 9th. So that's when the ballots will begin going out at that time. So early July is when people should start looking for their ballot, after July 9th. So 10th, 11th, 12th, starting from that time period. Regarding a request, you can make a request for a ballot, vote by mail ballot for one single election, or you can make a request for a vote by mail ballot through 2 general election cycles. So if you made that request now, you can request ballots under the law through December 2022. So through the next gubernatorial or midterm general election. And what would happen is we would just automatically mail a voter a ballot in an election that they're eligible to vote in. And at the end of that, we will send out a notice saying, asking the voter if they would like to re-up for another 2 general election cycles. At that time, it'll be about four years that they will be able to sign up for under the law. So you have an option. The other thing is, remember, we only mail ballots to the address in your voter record. Vote by mail ballots are not forwardable. And if you want a ballot mailed to an address that isn't in your voter record, then you have to provide that address to us in writing. And all of this is, again, under Florida law. These are not kind of internal procedures that we make up, but things that fall under Florida statute.
Very good. As far as voting early, how many days before the primary or general election can one vote early?
So we will have early voting in the primary 9 days before the election. From 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., right? So it runs 2 Saturdays before the election through the Sunday right before the election. And then for the general election, we're doing the full gamut under the law, which is 14 days of early voting. So 2 weeks of early voting, 10 hours per day at right now, we've identified 7 sites. I'm looking to add an 8th site in the county for early voting for the general election, not the primary. And that, again, is based on turnout, because during a primary, typically the turnout's 30-some-odd%, but for a general election, we were predicting before the coronavirus about an 80% turnout in Sarasota County. So big difference between staffing and things between those elections.
Absolutely. Okay. Here, Donna questions, many people don't realize that their vote by mail status lapses every 2 years. Couldn't some notification be sent when vote by mail status expires?
We do that. We mail something to the voter when it expires. And it's not necessarily 2 years, it's 2 general election cycles. So right now that's closer to 2 years or 2.5 years. The next time, if someone was on that cycle and dropped, they could ask for it would be a 4-year period of time. But it's 2 general election cycles is what it's based on.
Right. And would you remind us of the deadline, Ron, for requesting vote by mail ballots for both the primary and general elections?
The vote by mail deadline is 10 days prior, which is a Saturday. So that's always 2 Saturdays prior to the election, 5 p.m. And that is the last point that you can request a vote by mail ballot be mailed to you. Other than that, you can pick up a vote by mail ballot in one of our offices, but to have one mailed to you, it is 10 days prior to the election, which is a Saturday. As it was 2 Saturdays prior at 5 p.m. That's the cutoff.
Thank you. Marguerite asks, after the consolidation of polling places, will there be a convenient polling place for residents of Newtown, since many of those residents may not have reliable transportation?
To my knowledge, no locations there have been consolidated that I'm aware of, or that would impact negatively that area. So.
Great. All right, Brenda says, there was an article in the newspaper last week concerning the Center for Voter Information, and it was confusing. Are you able to explain how this disrupts the election system when they appear to be encouraging voters to mail in ballots? I don't know if you saw that article, Ron.
Well, I didn't see the article, but I'm certainly familiar with the. Oh yeah, I did see the article. Well, I'm familiar with the group that you're talking about. They're not new. The same group has been primarily focused on voter registration over the years in Florida, and has received some at times, I guess, kind of negative comments from some of my colleagues in Florida based on who those voter applications are sent to. Because sometimes I don't know where the group is getting their list from. This time they're encouraging vote by mail. So yes, I've heard about that because I had some voters complain to me. As I said earlier, I get emails, phone calls. I have a letter in my inbox now from a voter that wrote to me. That happens on a regular basis. So, but this is one of the groups that I hear about, but they're not new to Florida. I did read the article because some of the supervisors were pretty outspoken about their criticism of this mailing. So I'm familiar with what you said, but right now we're getting both political parties that are doing mailings with vote by mail, outside groups, you name it. A lot of people are involved in this. So it does cause a lot of confusion, even when political parties mail something, because oftentimes the vote by mail application will have my name on it. So I will get fan mail, as I call it, and it's not necessarily positive because people get confused, just like the one that you're talking about, that group. There were some people that thought the mailing was from me, and I had to ask them to please look at the envelope and the mailing to see who it was paid for by or who sponsored it. And you will notice that it does not say Ron Turner, Sarasota County Supervisor of Elections, on there, that I'm the one that sent that. Sent that out. So if we send anything from our office, it has an official election mail logo from the USPS, and we're the only ones that are allowed to use that. So as I mentioned, I've got a postcard mailer that's going out later this week, and it will have that on there, and it has my name and logo and things. So it's for me when it has all of those things on there.
Great, very good tip. Number of questions about being a poll worker. I would love to be a poll worker, but can't be on my feet for 14 hours. Any thoughts to make shorter shifts or shift sharing?
Probably not right now, because even that would cause disruption to try to change the whole system with that. What I would say to that person is we do need early voting workers. We need people to help us in vote by mail in other areas. Certainly, if they can't be a poll worker on election day, there may be other places where they could work, and it's based on shifts where poll workers are not. Most offices don't do shifts for poll workers. One of the reasons is because of the way the chain of custody and things are for all the ballots and equipment and the things. So the people who opened in the morning are supposed to be the same election board that closed down at night. And I know that's a long day for people, but we do have potentially other opportunities. So they could reach out to our office, our HR department, and we can always possibly, if we have any vacancies in other areas, we could use help.
Great, thank you. Tell us about the protections that are being put in place to protect poll workers against, I believe the questioner is talking about the coronavirus.
Right.
Yeah.
We will have masks and face shields for our, the kind of clear face shields and masks for the poll workers. We will also have um, uh, sanitizer, wipes, those sorts of things that we're trying to use. For the public, we will, during early voting election day, mark off at least at the beginning where lined forms what 6 feet looks like, kind of like what you see at Publix, at least a few of those kind of lines, probably with blue tape. And then we'll have signs that say vote smart, stay 6 feet apart. And we will ask people to, so we will tell them we encourage them to social distance, and we encourage facial coverings or face masks. Now, I have had a poll worker that was upset because I said we would encourage. I don't have any legal authority to require people coming in to vote with masks. And I know there's a lot of conversation now, even making masks required, because we have some neighboring communities that have done that in their local government. However, when you get into voting, that gets into a whole nother kind of issue with potentially voter suppression and other things, depending on how people look at this subject. And we don't all look at it the same, unfortunately. So from our side, we will provide the protection for our poll workers, and then we will do our best to encourage the public to follow along, and that's what we have the authority to do. But we will provide the supplies, like I said, face masks, face shields, things like that for our workers.
Great. Okay. In terms of, are you looking for help with processing vote by mail ballots? And if so, how would someone go about applying to be a volunteer?
If someone would like to work with us, they can contact our office. It would be through our HR, because it's not a poll worker position. But if someone wants to help, it's not a volunteer position. We pay people to work with us, and we'd be happy to have them contact us. And if we do have openings as we work through this, a lot of the people come back to work with us that have been here before. Some people may not feel like they can do that because of the virus. So some of that's going to depend on what our workforce is like, because we'll use a lot of the people that we have used in the past because they've been around, they're seasoned, we know them. But we certainly would encourage people, if they would like to help us, to please contact the elections office.
Great. Tell us, are you recruiting teenagers to become poll workers? Can you do that?
Yes, we do. We have an active student poll worker program, and under Florida law, you can be a poll worker if you're at least pre-registered to vote, which you can do at 16 or 17 years of age. So before the coronavirus, we would visit, and like you all, the league knows, all of the high schools in Sarasota County and try to register and pre-register students to vote. And we would do a lot of them, probably in excess of 1,000 students every year. What we're doing now, and then we would encourage them to be poll workers. We're still doing that, working with the schools the best that we can under the current circumstances. A, the virus, and B, it's summertime now. But we're working with them, working with the colleges, like Ringling New College. We've sent information to them about potentially being poll workers also. I mean, they're not teenagers, but if they have an interest, certainly we would appreciate that. So we are trying to balance that way, because we get that question a lot, especially because of some of the health information that we've heard, and about how the virus potentially affects or doesn't impact the same people in different age categories.
Right, right. How about poll worker training, Ron? Is that done online or in person, and about how much time is required to train?
Typically, it's done, in the past, it was done in person with some more routine kind of information provided online. We are working now to increase our online training portion, because obviously we can't do as much in person as we could before. We will still be doing some in-person training, with social distancing and mask and those sorts of things but that certainly cuts down on how many people we can have in a room with social distancing. So under Florida law, it's a minimum of 2 hours and up to 3 hours, depending on the position that you have. We used to train more than what the law required, but we're working through all of that right now. But more will be online, and then there will be in person, but there will be smaller classes and probably shorter in-person classes than what we had in the past. It's what's likely.
Right, right. We're getting to the end here. Ruth says, I believe the mail-in ballot must be received on election day. What is the usual time for mailing to ensure it will get to your office on time to be counted?
You're right with that. It does have to be received by us by election day by 7 p.m. The only postmarks do not work for those ballots, only if you're overseas, and we can take those up to 10 days after an election. I would say mail as soon as you feel comfortable with mailing it back. Don't delay if you're going to put it in the mail with that ballot. If you're getting to a point where you're the weekend before or the Thursday or Friday before the election, at that point you're probably going to get to a point where you need to come drop it off to us in person in one of those secure drop boxes. So I'd say I can't definitely say what the mail standard is. I think it's 2 days now, potential delivery, and then you get the weekend and mail volume. So I wouldn't take any chances if I was a voter in that last week. Either get it to us right away or come drop it off in person to us.
Thank you. And our last question, Brenda says, I am a green card holder but not eligible to vote yet. Am I allowed to be a poll worker?
Unfortunately, not under Florida law. You have to be a registered voter to work at the polls, and that is Florida law.
Ron, you have done an amazing job of running through our questions and answering each and every one. That was a lot of information that you've given us, and we are really grateful. We know you're busy right now, and it's been a great